Sorry, I'm Dr. Chuck with CMAC. It's been a while since we've done the Med Tutor video in English language, right? So today, I figured we're going to do a Med Tutor in the English language, and we're going to continue with our discussion of the cranial nerves. If you remember last time, we were reviewing about cranial nerve that has to do with the eye, right? Extraocular muscle with the movement of the eyeball and also the accommodation. So that's cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6. So oculomotor, trochlear, and abducens nerve, and that all has to do with your eye. And that was the last Med Tutor video. And if you have not seen that video, when you want to review your cranial nerve 3, 4, and 6, you can see it right here. Today we're going to do a part of trigeminal nerve, right? And trigeminal nerve, that's cranial nerve 5. And you know, the name is interesting, right? Trigeminal, tri means 3. So you can probably guess that the trigeminal nerve or the cranial nerve 5 has 3 branches, right? It's right. Has ophthalmic branch, maxillary branch, and the mandibular branch. Trigeminal nerve, 3 branches. And you know, there's 2 main functions of the trigeminal nerve, right? One of the functions of the trigeminal nerve is to give sensation of your face. And when I say sensation, what does that mean? It means touch, temperature, pain, and preperception, even preperception. What is preperception? Preperception is, you know, for you to know the position of the face. Like, you don't even have to, like, you can close your eyes and you can turn your face this way. And preperception is going to tell you that, you know, now your face is turning towards the left and maybe it's tilted a little bit. That's preperception, to know the facial position. So, so trigeminal nerve, one of the functions is sensation of the face, touch, temperature, pain, preperception. So as I said, one of the functions of trigeminal nerve is to give sensation of your face, right? To tell your brain that something's touching your face, or you have any pain in your face. That's going to tell your brain that, you know, there's pain in your face, or something's touching your face. It's sensation. So, and that sensation is felt through the 3 branches of trigeminal nerve, the ophthalmic, maxillary, and the mandibular branch. So the ophthalmic branch, we can call that V1. V1 is ophthalmic branch, and basically it gives sensation to your eyeball and almost you know, anything above your eyeball. So your eyelid, your upper eyelid, your forehead and your scalp, and the tip of your nose. That's all from the ophthalmic branch of the trigeminal nerve. And maxillary branch gives the sensation below your eyeball. So your lower eyelid, your lateral nose, your paranasal sinus, your upper lip, and also your maxillary teeth. What is maxillary teeth? That's basically your upper teeth, right? And also it gives the sensation to your cheek, so your cheek a little bit, and your maxillary sinus also. So your cheek, maxillary sinus, basically this strip right here, that's from the maxillary branch of your trigeminal nerve. And the mandibular nerve, that gives the sensation to your lower face, to your lower lip, your chin, your mandibular teeth, that's your lower teeth. And also it gives sensation to the anterior 2/3 of your tongue. And not to be confused with the taste. You know, the taste, that's actually by cranial nerve 7. The taste of the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, that's by cranial nerve 7. That's the taste. But the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, it gives a sensation of, like, you know, touch and pressure and pain and temperature of the front of your teeth. So again, when I say sensation of the face, I mean pain, temperature, touch, pressure, and preperception of the face. And as I said, the 3 branches of the trigeminal nerve, ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular branch, those are the branches that will bring the sensation back to your brain and telling your brain that, hey, you know, now something's hurting my face or something's touching my face. And the three branches of this that bring the sensation back to the brain, what kind of fiber do these branches carry? These branches carry a sensation fiber that's called GSA, General Symmetric Efferent Fiber. And that fiber is gonna be the fiber that carries the sensation, the pain, the temperature, the touch back to the brain and telling your brain that, hey, you know, now somebody's touching my face or things like that. So the sensation fiber is the GSA fiber, the General Symmetric Efferent Fiber. So that's one function of the trigeminal nerve, the sensation, give us the sensation of our face. And the second function of the trigeminal nerve is quite important. It has a motor function as well, and the motor function of the trigeminal nerve involves mainly with controlling the muscle mastication. What is the muscle mastication? That's the muscle that's involved with when we chew food or we eat food. You know, with the grinding muscle when you grind food, when you move our mouth side to side when we chew food. That's the muscle mastication. That's so that's the second function of the trigeminal nerve. It's a motor function. And you know, one of the most important motor functions the trigeminal nerve controls when we chew food, when we eat. So today, I'm going to concentrate on the motor branch of the trigeminal nerve, and I'm going to explain in detail like how that works. You know, how the motor branch controls these muscles that's involved in chewing. And in the next video, we're going to do the sensory fiber of the trigeminal nerve. There's so many branches of the trigeminal nerve, and it's quite complicated. And you know, I want to be as detailed as possible when I give you this information, because you know, I want you to understand this. So the next video, we're going to do the sensation of the face, and we're going to do the clinical relevance. And today in this video, I want to concentrate on the motor fiber of the trigeminal nerve and how it controls the muscle mastication, how it controls the muscle that's involved in chewing. So with that, let's begin. Let's talk about the motor part of the trigeminal nerve, or we call it the mandibular motor nerve, right? And so where does it begin? Like let's look at the origin of this motor fiber of the trigeminal nerve. It actually begins in the nucleus. It's called the motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. And where is that located? It's located in your brainstem. To be more specific, the nucleus of the motor nucleus of the trigeminal nerve is located in the pons. To be more specific, mid-pons, right? And it gives off the motor fiber. And that motor fiber will run in the middle cranial fossa. And when it runs together with very closely with the sensory fiber. So it runs very closely with the V3 sensory fiber. So the V3 or the mandibular motor fiber and the sensory fiber will run very closely together. And the motor fiber, what kind of fiber is that? The motor fiber is something that we call the SVE, so the Special Visceral Efferent fiber. So this is actually quite interesting that the SVE fibers, the Special Visceral Efferent fibers, they are the fibers that provide the motor innervation, the movement innervation to your to the muscle of your pharyngeal arches. What are the pharyngeal arches? This is actually quite interesting concept. The pharyngeal arches are actually embryological structure, like embryology, right? They're the embryological structure that were developed into the muscles and into the structure, like when you become adult human. So the pharyngeal, let's for example, the first pharyngeal arch, right? The first pharyngeal arch will develop into the muscle mastication and your lower jaw, so the muscle that's involved in controlling when you chew food and things like that. And for example, the second pharyngeal arch when you're in embryology, and the second embryology arch when you develop, that will become the muscle of your facial features when you smile, when you frown, and that, as you know, is controlled or innervated by your cranial nerve 7. Cranial nerve 7 is involved in, like, when you smile, when you frown, your facial your facial expression, right? So that's second pharyngeal arch. And the muscle mastication, or the muscle that's involved in chewing, that's developed from the first pharyngeal arch, right? First pharyngeal arch, like when you develop into adult, that will become the muscle mastication, the muscle of the lower jaw, and that's going to be innervated by what? By your trigeminal nerve, your motor part of your mandibular nerve. It's going to involve it's going to involve with controlling the muscle of the first pharyngeal arch, and that's the muscle of mastication. So just to make it easy for you to understand, sensation of the face is controlled by fiber of the trigeminal nerve. That fiber is called the SGA, the general somatic afferent fiber, and the fiber that's controlled the motor part of the trigeminal nerve, the movement part. That fiber is going to be called SEV, the special efferent fiber. So SEV, motor part, SGA, that's sensation part. So the SVE fiber, the motor fiber, is going to leave the trigeminal motor nucleus in the mid parts, right? And it's going to run in the middle cranial fossa. And it's going to run very closely with the sensory fiber, the V3 sensory fiber, the mandibular nerve sensory fiber. That's going to be run closely with the motor fiber. And most of the time we call the motor fiber of trigeminal nerve, we call that the motor branch of the mandibular nerve, so V3 motor nerve. And so V3 motor nerve and V3 sensory nerve is going to run very closely together, and it's going to leave your skull. It's going to leave your skull, and it's going to come and invade your face. So it's going to go through a foramen, which is very important. It's going to go through an opening foramen called foramen ovale, right? So that's how the V3 branch, or the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, leaves your skull and enter into your face through foramen ovale. And you know, this is quite different from the two other branches, the V1 and V2, the ophthalmic branch and the maxillary branch. That actually goes through the cavernous sinus, right? The V3 on the mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve, that doesn't go through the cavernous sinus. Obviously, it goes through foramen ovale, and it leaves the skull, it exits the skull via foramen ovale, and both sensory branch and the motor branch come and innervate the muscle of your face. And for the lab exam, as I said, it's so important to know the foramina, the little holes that the nerve exit the skull. So it's very important for you to know that foramen ovale is the point that V3 or the mandibular nerve leaves the skull. And in your lab exam, maybe your professor is going to tag foramen ovale from the skull, and he's going to ask you what nerve leaves the skull here, and your answer can be V3, mandibular nerve. Mandibular nerve leaves exit the skull via foramen ovale. So as I said, today I'm going to concentrate on the motor part of the trigeminal nerve, the motor branch. So that's going to be the V3, the motor fiber of V3, of the motor branch of the mandibular nerve. And so, as I said, that branch comes from the trigeminal motor nucleus, enters the middle cranial fossa, and exits the skull via the foramen ovale. And when it exits foraminal valve, that motor fiber is going to come, you know, into your face now, and that's a main branch. That's a main motor branch, main V3 motor branch, main mandibular motor branch, and it's going to split into 3 branches. So it's going to split into anterior branch, and it's going to split into the internal pterygoid nerve, and it's going to split into the inferior alveolar nerve. So 3 branches. So one main branch, main motor branch, and then it splits into the anterior branch and internal pterygoid nerve and the inferior alveolar nerve, right? So we're going to look at the anterior branch first of the motor of the trigeminal motor fiber. So now we're looking at main branch and the anterior branch. So the anterior branch mainly supplies the muscle mastication, muscle involved in chewing the food, the chewing muscle. And so there's 4 muscle involved in the process of chewing food. 3 of the muscle closes the mouth, 1 muscle open the mouth, and all of the muscle involved in moving your jaw from side to side, and protruding and retrusion of your mandible. So all that actions involved in, you know, grinding with the food and making sure the food doesn't stuck on the side of your face, bring the food, you know, to the middle of your mouth and chewing the food. That's muscle mastication. And that 4 muscle, what are they? So masseter, temporalis, medial pterygoid, and lateral pterygoid. So the four muscles of mastication. And of course your jaw, your mandible, is connected to your temporal bone through a joint called the temporal mandibular joint, right? And those 4 muscles are attached to these bones, attached to the 2 bones, and they're going to manipulate your jaw and chewing food and grinding food in a certain way. Okay, the anterior branch of the motor part of the mandibular nerve supplies 3 muscles, right? So you have your main motor branch, then you have the anterior branch, and from the anterior branch it goes to supply your masseter muscle, and that's going to be involved in closing your jaw. So it's going to bring your masseter, is going to bring your mandibular, it's going to elevate it, so it's going to close your mouth and, you know, move it from side to side like grinding food. And from that anterior branch, that's going to be another branch going up. From the anterior branch, that's going to be another branch going up, and that branch, we're going to call that nerve deep temporal nerve. That deep temporal nerve is going to supply the temporalis muscle, and the temporalis muscles, that's going to close your jaw as well. That's going to close your jaw, involving grinding and you know, protrusion and retrusion of your mandible, so grinding the food. And also from the anterior branch, that's going to be another branch. From the anterior branch is going to be another branch, and that nerve is going to be called the lateral pterygoid nerve. And the lateral pterygoid nerve is going to supply the lateral pterygoid muscle. And the lateral pterygoid muscle is the only muscle mastication that opens the jaw. So it pulls down your mandible. So it opens up the jaw and involving grinding the food, moving it side to side, make sure the food comes into the middle of your mouth. And so that's the anterior branch. So the anterior branch supplies 3 muscles: the masseter, temporalis, and the lateral pterygoid. And it gives off, you know, two branches. From the anterior branch, it gives off deep temporal nerve and gives off the lateral pterygoid nerve. Now let's look at the second branch of the motor part of the mandibular nerve. And remember, we just did the first branch. So the first branch, so that's the main motor branch, and the anterior anterior part, which supplies the three muscles that I just explained to you. Now the second branch comes from the main branch, and the second branch, what do we call the second branch? The second branch is a nerve that we call the internal pterygoid nerve. And the internal pterygoid nerve would supply a muscle called the medial pterygoid muscle. And the medial pterygoid muscle is the only muscle of mastication that's supplied by a different nerve. All the other muscle mastication, the three other muscles I described, they are supplied by the anterior branch, right? The anterior branch of the motor part of the trigeminal nerve. But the medial pterygoid nerve, that is supplied by the internal pterygoid nerve, so the second branch. So supply the medial pterygoid nerve, and the function is, chewing again. So closing the jaw and grinding, and moving your jaw side to side. That's grinding food, and that's also keeping the food in the middle of your mouth. So that's all the muscle mastication. And as I said, the motor fiber, or the motor part of the trigeminal nerve, the motor part that's going to supply the muscles of the first pharyngeal arch, right? And that's involved in the muscle mastication. And also there are some other muscle from the first pharyngeal arch also that's supplied by the motor part of the trigeminal nerve. What are the other muscle? So the tensor tympani, and the tensor valley palatini, the anterior body of digastric, and the myelohyroid muscle. So we're going to look at all these muscles as well, because these muscles are supplied by the motor part of the V3, or the motor part of the mandibular nerve, which is a part of the trigeminal nerve. So now let's look at the tensor tympani muscle, which is part of the first pharyngeal arch, right? And I said the first pharyngeal arch is the motor function supplied by the mandibular nerve, the motor part of the trigeminal nerve, which is V3, the motor part of the mandibular nerve. So the tensor tympani is supplied by a nerve called the tensor tympani nerve, right? And where is that nerve coming from? That nerve is coming from the internal pterygoid nerve, and the internal pterygoid nerve is coming from the main motor branch, right? So you have the main motor branch, and which splits into your internal pterygoid nerve, which goes and supply the medial pterygoid muscle. But at the same time, with that internal pterygoid nerve, it's going to give a branch, and that branch is going to be called the tensor tympani nerve, and that's going to supply the tensor tympani muscle. And what is the function of tensor tympani muscle? And the function of that is actually to dim down the noise when we chew. Actually, when we chew food, the noise is so loud, right? And sometimes, if we don't have that tensor tympani muscle, we're not going to be able to hear anything when we chew food, because when we chew food, that noise is so loud, and there's so many activity going on in the mouth. The pterygoid muscle working, the masseter, the temporalis, making sure the food stays in the middle of the mouth, and there's so many grinding action going on when we chew. The noise can be very loud. So what happens is that when we chew food, the tensor tympani muscle will tense up, and when that muscle contracts, it's gonna pull down the handle, the malleolus, immediately, and in turn that's gonna tense up the tympanic membrane. So the tympanic membrane is gonna act as like a shield, shield for in your middle ear. There's gonna be the ossicle, the three muscles, the ossicles. It's gonna vibrate. So the tensor tympani is gonna make sure that the tympanic membrane tense up, and that's gonna act as a barrier for the vibration. So it's gonna cause less vibration coming from your middle ear, and that's gonna dim down the sound when you chew food. So you can hear other things, hear other people when you chew food, and that's the function of one of the functions of tensor tympani, which is to dim down the volume when we chew food, make sure that we don't just hear the sound that we chew, the grinding sound, the chewing sound. And as I said, the tensor tympani muscle is supplied by the by the tensor tympani nerve, and the tensor tympani nerve is a branch of the internal pterygoid nerve, and the internal pterygoid nerve is coming from the main branch of the motor fiber of the V3. Okay, the next muscle of the first pharyngeal arch is the tensor veli palatini, and this muscle is part of your soft palate actually, and the nerve that controls it is coming from the internal pterygoid nerve. So internal pterygoid nerve will give a branch, and that branch is going to be called nerve 2 tensor veli palatini. And basically this muscle, when it contracts, when it tenses up, it will elevate your soft palate, and it will aid in your swallowing. And also, this is very important, it's going to close off the nasopharyngeal cavity, so it makes sure that when you eat food, that the food doesn't regurgitate through your nasopharynx, so the food doesn't come through your nose when you swallow, which is quite important, right? The next muscle of the first pharyngeal arch is the myelohyroid muscle, and this muscle, the function is to help raise, when it contracted, it helps raise the hyoid bone, and that will aid in swallowing and speaking. And also this muscle, the myelohyroid muscle, will help the lateral pterygoid to open the mouth, to open the mouth during chewing. And what nerve supplies this muscle? What nerve supplies the myelohyroid muscle? That nerve is the myelohyroid nerve. And this is actually a branch of the inferior alveolar nerve. So let's go back to the main branch, right? The main motor branch is split into 3 branches. So the anterior branch, and the internal pterygoid branch, and the inferior alveolar branch. And this inferior alveolar branch is quite interesting because this branch will run along with the sensory fiber. So this branch, inferior alveolar branch, will run along with the GSA fiber, with the general somatic afferent fiber. That's the sensation fiber. So the inferior alveolar branch will have sensory fiber and the motor fiber, and that's going to go and supply your mandibular teeth. So it gives sensation to your teeth. Give sensation to your teeth first, and then the motor branch is going to break off. The motor branch is going to split, and that's going to become your myelohyroid nerve. And the myelohyroid nerve is going to supply your myelohyroid muscle, which is, as I said, is important in raising your hyoid bone, swallowing, speaking, and helping your lateral pterygoid open your mouth. And the last muscle of the first pharyngeal arch is the anterior belly of digastric muscle, and the anterior belly of digastric muscle is also supplied by myelohyroid nerve, and we know that's coming from the inferior alveolar nerve, and that's coming from the main branch of the motor nerve of the V3. So the main motor nerve of V3 splits into inferior alveolar nerve. That's going to supply your teeth, give you your lower teeth sensation. It's going to supply, it's going to become the myelohyroid nerve, and after that, the myelohyroid nerve is going to supply the myelohyroid muscle, and also that will supply the anterior belly of digastric. And the anterior belly of digastric has so many complex movement that helps with swallowing, speaking, and also raise your hyoid bone, and it's going to help open your mouth when your masseter and your temporalis muscle relaxes. So that's going to help open your mouth. So these are the branches and the function of the motor fiber of the V3 or the mandibular nerve of the cranial nerve 5. So I think that's all the important branch of V3 motor fiber, or the motor fiber of the mandibular division of the trigeminal nerve. And as I said, it's quite complex, and that's why I want to go slowly with the trigeminal nerve. The next video, we're going to do the sensation fibers, the GSA, the general somatic afferent fiber, the fiber that carry the sensation of the ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular branch back to the brain. And as I said, you know, it's quite complex. There's so many branches from the sensory branch. But today, I think we did pretty well on going over the motor function and the motor branch, the different branches that control the muscle that is innervated by the motor branch of the trigeminal nerve. And as I said, you know, it can be overwhelming, you know, with all this information. But as I said, you know, I always said this, and my professor always tell me when I'm down, is that you know, medical education, it takes very little brain. You don't have to be smart. You don't have to be the smartest person to study medicine and master these concepts. You just have to be the most disciplined person. You've got to sit there, go over the concept, you know, sit there, going over the concept for hours and hours and hours, and, you know, repeating stuff. When you repeat stuff, doing something again, repetition, that will go into your long-term memory. So I want to say that again, that, you know, you don't have to be smart to like master these concepts. You just have to be good at discipline. Have to be good at studying, you know. And as I said, you know, I'm always there to support you. If you have any question, you can comment below. You can like message me on Facebook, and I'm always going to be there to help. Another thing is that, you know, I try to do these videos, these med tutor in the English language, because as I said many times, English language is a universal language of medical education. And I want to help as many people as I can. And mostly these board exams, USMLE and important board exams all over the world is done in English language. So I want to be helpful. So I want to do this video in the English language. And you know, the last few Facebook lives, I've done like 6 or 7 Facebook lives. And these Facebook live I've done it in Thai language. And what we've been doing for you non-Thai speakers that are interested in my Facebook live, I've been going over the USMLE style questions, you know, over the board style questions. And I've been giving my train of thoughts. Like when I see these questions, how I'm thinking, how I'm coming to my final best answer, how I'm coming up with these differential diagnosis, how I'm like cutting out the incorrect answer choices, and how, you know, if I'm lost, how do I trick my mind to get back on track. And I've done this in the Thai language, but in the future, in my Facebook live, when I'm going over these USMLE concepts and USMLE questions, I'm going to do it in the English language so everybody can understand. And I said, you know, our dream, the CMAC dream, we want to create our own Qbank, and that's something we're working on. And I'm going to be giving you updates on our project of like having our own Qbank, having our own flashcards, especially for like, you know, subjects that require a lot of memorization, like histology, seeing different type of tissues, and subject like anatomy, where a lot of straight memorization. That's good, and I think that flashcards will be useful for that. So I hope you guys learned something today. I'm Dr. Chuck with CMAC. Swadee krab.